Redditors who quit their jobs in a blaze of glory. What's your story? Not me, but my dad. He was a partner in a software company and they were undergoing a merger. There was a ton of confusion in the move, and one guy was trying to take advantage of the situation. He was from the other company. He fired my dad for no real reason. However, my dad was so well liked that many of the employees from his company walked out of the building when he left with his stuff. One guy apparently came running down to the parking lot because he realized that the guy did not have the authority to fire my dad. My dad puts his things in his car, goes back upstairs, fires the guy who tried to fire him, and quits. I don't know if this is a blaze of glory, but it made me feel good. I got a job in the big city. My new manager said that she wanted to give me a 2-week trial period because she just wasn't sure about me. This manager was a biatch, constantly yelling, expecting us to work through lunch and work late and come in early. Sessions in her office about how awful we were. I was miserable. The job was heck. The Friday of the end of my trial period, my manager called me into her office. She said she was pleasantly surprised at how good I was and she definitely wanted to keep me on. I told her that unfortunately she had not passed her trial period and I would not be staying. Then I walked out. The best elevator ride down to the lobby ever. People often forget that employment is a two-way street. It's always refreshing to remind them of that. Walked out on a job interview. Smoldering glory. Not really a blaze. I drove about 4 hours for a job interview right out of grad school. Nice place. Working environment seemed a little tense, but that's alright. This was an animal hospital in the Midwest. The owner asked me to clean a cage for him. I said sure. Doctors have to clean cages every once in a while. It takes maybe 10 seconds. Then he asked me to hang out for a second while he talked to a client. I said sure. He told me to just keep cleaning cages. I thought he was kidding. A technician walked into the room and asked me why the cages weren't done. I shrugged. From her attitude I gathered he wasn't kidding about the cages. After a wait in excess of 20 minutes, I left. I just left. Got a phone call about 5 minutes later. Didn't answer it. One of my first jobs was part-time at a small budget supermarket. The boss was a W of severely limited intelligence, assigning me far more shifts than I agreed to and spending the entire day shouting at everybody rather than doing actual work. Turns out I was also getting €1 less per hour than agreed on. I noticed that after a month when I finally got my first pay. Not cool. Grounds enough for me to terminate my work contract with immediate effect. So, I got myself a new job. Typed out my notice, put it in my coat pocket and waited for the worst possible moment to quit. That moment came 2 weeks later. My boss and I were opening on a Saturday, and it just so happened that the cashier that was meant to come in an hour later called in sick. He tells me and goes off on a tirade about how the shift is going to be heck with just the two of us. I smile, hand him my notice, and stroll out of the store without saying a word. Best feeling ever. Was working as a busser at Outback in college, animation major, was there roughly 6 months, never called out, always came in when asked to. Finals were coming up, and I was slightly behind on my final project. Called the manager 3 days in advance saying I needed a day off I was scheduled for. Told me I had to get it covered. No problem. Called all the other bidders and even 2 hostesses. No one would do it. Called the boss back. His response, and I quote, "You need to decide right now what's more important, school or your career." I exploded on the guy with the easiest decision I ever made in my life. Not exactly a blaze, more of a slow burn. Used to be a Comcast tech, put in my 2-week notice, and got as many parking tickets as I could. The tickets couldn't be pegged to me because I didn't own a vehicle. Comcast has a policy that employees need to pay their own parking tickets, but by the time Comcast got the tickets in the mail, I would not have been an employee anymore. And, you know that phenomenon where work vehicles can park anywhere and not get a ticket? That does not apply to vehicles that say Comcast on the side. I still like to imagine the curses made in my name after they uncovered the extent of my evil plot. Wasn't me, but I was a debt supervisor at Best Buy for a while back in the early 2000s. We had 10 rows of various software. The store manager always made this one employee rearrange the planogram each week. It sucked. This dude had enough. He farted into the overhead intercom, shouted "Eat my crap," and shoulder blocked the software racks to the ground, knowing I was going to have to clean it up. I was never more peeved at a person. Looking back, never more impressed. Bumped into him last year at the same Best Buy. He smiled and said, "Looks like they stopped selling software." I worked at a technical support call center for almost a decade. The average burnout time turnover is 6 months. I was sitting in a meeting and they were ragging on us for sending too many boxes. The week previously we were sitting in the exact same room being ragged on for not sending enough boxes. I had a rough year, and I was just sitting there dying inside. I had this sudden epiphany. Every day since I had walked in the door of that place was worse than the last. There was literally no reason for me to be there. That thought just popped into my head like a light bulb went off. I got up in the middle of the meeting and walked out without a word. The SDM that was giving the meeting's mouth hung open. He wasn't used to the drones doing things like this. He started after me, and I ignored him. I went back to my desk, gathered up some things, gave a few other things to some people and got out a goodbye email. The whole time the SDM getting more and more agitated trying to talk to me, eventually yelling. I just ignored him like a bad smell at a dinner party, so I just went home. They called and called for days. Eventually a supervisor I had on Facebook messaged me. He was an okay dude, and I told him flatly that no, I wasn't returning. He said they had all this paperwork to do, and an exit interview and so on. I said no. I wasn't going back on that floor. I wasn't going to sit in an office like a bad teenager in the principal's office. It was over. It was done. We finally agreed to meet downstairs in an empty cubicle. I flatly didn't agree to anything, didn't sign anything, just gathered whatever crap they had for me and left. For a near decade they dictated everything in my life. My sleep schedule, my family life, holidays. They went so far as to time to the second how long I was in the bathroom during the day. That was all over. They had no more control over me and I enjoyed making that clear. This is sort of the opposite, but whatever. I was working for a tech startup in 1998 that was growing by leaps and bounds. And one day they reorged the department and promoted this guy, let's call him Teddy, who had been there for like 2 weeks, to manager. He had 4 or 5 people working for him, and he treated them all like crap. They were all self-motivated, senior level people, and he treated them like children. He micromanaged their work, berating everything they did, complained when they had to leave work for stuff like a dentist appointment or a sick kid. When he first took over, he tried to enforce a policy where none of them could check in code unless he code reviewed it in person and then did the check-in himself. That lasted less than 2 weeks. He reviewed an existing, approved schedule for a software release, decided it wasn't aggressive enough, told his superiors that they were going to pull it in by 3 months, and then ordered everyone to work weekends. Not because there was a business need, but because he wanted to show them that he could get stuff done. After a few months, this woman, let's call her Kelly, who was working for him, gave her 2 weeks notice, saying that she was offered a managerial job at another company. Teddy lost it. You could hear him screaming through the walls of his office. Then as she walked out of the office and he followed her to the exit, shouting at her the whole time, "You're freaking worthless. Kelly, you're going to fail. Don't come crawling back looking for a job. I'm glad to see you go. Now I can hire someone with real skills," etc., etc. For at least a month after she was gone, he would randomly just say crap like, "I can't believe that B just up and left. What a CRO. Kelly really fricked things up good. We're probably going to miss our release date because of how she left things." HR sat down privately with the guy to talk things over, and then he started bitching about HR. They're covering their asses so they don't get sued. They don't give a crap about good company men like me. A few months later our company was acquired and we went to the welcome meeting that the other company had set up. Their CTO and the VP of development spent about a half hour each talking about strategic vision, how the changes would affect us, the usual stuff. And then the VP said, "But there will be at least one familiar face to help with the transition. I think most of you know Kelly Johnson. She used to work here. She'll be the senior manager in charge of the products team moving forward." So, everyone looked back at Teddy, who was white as a sheet and looked like he was about to have a heart attack. He was gone within a month. Not me, but one of my best friends. We were working at a Burger King when we were like 15-16. It was actually the day after he already quit, but it was super busy and some people called off. So they called to see if he could come in. I think they offered him like time and a half to make up for it. So he agrees. He's the only one in the kitchen on a busy Sunday after church rush. The managers were just bullshitting, standing outside smoking and doing anything they could to not help him. So he got frustrated, threw a package of ham through the ceiling and walked out. After working there for over 2 years, starting at the bottom when there were only 3 employees, including me, and becoming supervisor manager, I was overdue a raise. The boss kept putting off our meeting to discuss and I had prepped a small presentation to show what I had accomplished in my position over the past year. Meeting day finally came and I spoke for 15 minutes to justify the raise that I had asked for, but instead of a negotiation I was told that my work had been unsatisfactory and they no longer wanted me to act as supervisor. This had come as a shock because they had never given negative feedback about the way I was running things and they let me plead my case for a raise seconds before terminating my responsibilities. Of course, they would love me to stay at the company and train the new hires at my current, sad, salary and work at entry-level tasks when there was no active training. They also expected me to stay in the role I was not excelling and for another 2-4 months to allow them time to recruit my replacement and allow me time to get that person up to speed and adequately trained. The best part of all of this is that they had never hinted at or officially advised of any issues with the quality of my work. I walked out as soon as they were done speaking without saying anything. A few hours later he called asking if I would come back. The next morning I met with HR who expressed their apologies and shock, and suggested I go and speak with the boss to see if things could be sorted, hoping to find a happy medium. So I went to his office, shut the door and told him about how much of an butt he is and how he lost all respect I ever had for him, but that I would finish the week and close my open cases without hinting to clients about how crappy everything was behind the scenes in exchange for a larger severance package and being laid off. Turned out for the best because I'm pretty happy where I am now. Back when I worked at a car dealership as a mechanic, the service manager was screwing mechanics out of paychecks, cutting appointments, and only paying us for 30 hours of work at minimum wage instead of paying our normal hourly rate. The next payday Friday that came, the service manager came out and made an announcement saying he was going to extend hours and weekends with no pay difference. So at 7:20 AM, before the day even started, I walked right out to my truck, backed it into my bay, and loaded my tools up and left. He asked me to reconsider, and reminded me that you're guaranteed minimum wage. Yeah, frick you. I heard after that stunt, 3 other people quit without notice and he was asked to leave the dealership. Working in Wings Place just out of college as a cook. Start working there and everything is going okay except for the fact that I'm really underpaid. I was making minimum wage as one of 2 cooks in the restaurant. Work there for a few months and the manager sits down to talk with me. We discuss a few things and I bring up the fact that I really deserve a raise. I was working 50-60 hours a week and the compensation based on my effort really wasn't evening out. He basically told me to frick off and that cooks are a dime a dozen. So I told him I was disappointed with his retort. Times were tough for me at that time, so I bit my lip and just went back to work. The next few months were heck. The manager of the restaurant would openly put me down in front of other employees and constantly berate me for asking for more money. He would put me on back-to-back opening and closing shifts and send people home on purpose so I would be the only one left to clean the kitchen at the end of the night. I was beginning to lose my chill with this job. So finally Super Bowl Sunday rolls around and for those unaware, this is a very busy day for restaurants that make wings. I get into work and everyone is already mad. I ask what's up and they tell me the other cook didn't show up and nothing is prepped for the day. I roll up my sleeves and start working. We get everything set and I start making wings for the orders. I'm working my butt off and my manager comes up to me and starts giving me the same crap. The phones are ringing like crazy and honestly there are more orders than the restaurant can handle. It's freaking chaos. Then some of the manager's friends, not employees, come into the kitchen and start fricking with all my stuff. Moving things, disorganizing stuff, sitting on my prep counters. I tell them to get pho and my manager storms in and lays the frick into me. Tells me I'm a worthless piece of crap. I never do anything right. I'm not worth more than minimum wage and I never fricking put in any extra effort. That was it. My brain just clicked and I stopped giving a frick about anything. I stood up straight and stretched out my arms wide. Slowly took off my kitchen apron and removed my hat. stared dead in the manager's eyes and calmly but sternly said, "Have an enjoyable Super Bowl Sunday." I threw the apron and my hat in the fry oil basins, grabbed my bag and walked past the rest of the employees whose mouths were hanging open and out the back to the ever fading ring of phones ringing. Arrived at my home and met up with my roommates. I told them the story and we decided to order 200 wings and watch the game. Growing up in a small town, the guy that umpires all the little league games was a great umpire, but he had some issues upstairs, like he was somewhere on the autism scale. But like folks with some form of autism, he could pick one thing and focus on it and be good. His thing was baseball. Anyhow, the end of the little league season, the coaches wanted to have a tournament with all the teams in town. I think there was like 6 teams. That hadn't been planned on. The city didn't budget for it. So everyone pitched in to get the fields ready, and the umpire was more than happy to volunteer to ump the games. Anyhow, being that this was now some arbitrary tournament, some parents started giving the umpire a hard time, and by the time it got to the championship game, one guy in particular was ruthless. So finally the umpire had enough, threw off his mask and lost his mind on the dude, going, "Frick you. I have had enough of your crap. You want to have an fricking umpire this game? Do it your fricking self," and on for a couple minutes. And then he got on his bike and ride away. Another parent who played college baseball stepped in to umpire, and the craphead parent was told to get the frick out. My small-time office was bought out and taken over by a large company. Suddenly I was told I was just a secretary. My salary was cut, benefits non-existent, and there was nothing legally I could do, because I checked. They did it in such a way that it was if I started a new job. The new office manager told someone that his high school son could do my job for less pay, so in the summer my hours were cut. I finally said frick this and didn't show up. After bullying and tearful trips home, then I began to get frantic emails about how to deposit and split certain payments, how to use accounting programs, how to enter time-sensitive forms. So much whining. I guess nobody trained the boy and just sat him at the front desk. At first it was professional, then it turned to hostility, then begging. This was over the span of 2 days, in which I didn't check my email because I was busy at another job. I finally broke down and wrote an email stating I have all the information they needed stored on a website. At the bottom of the page was a link to Google. I signed it, just a secretary. You've been spotted by the curious cow. Comment below and let him know what you're doing. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.